This is Mark Belton, Super Training Gym, the strongest gym in the West. And I'm here with my nerdy coach, consultant, James Smith, the thinker. I brought him in as a hired hand to help me with the torn pec. And he's going to take me through some warming up and some stuff to help. So I'll be asking him questions along the way. Give him a little intro on what we're going to do here.
What we're beginning with is an example of cyclical activity to precede what's coming in the same way that one would think about a sprinter's preparation and the warm-up that consists of something cyclical and continuous just to get the blood flowing of relevance to what they're going to be doing. So they're starting off maybe with some easy running before they get into more different types of drills and so on. So because what Mark is going to be doing is more of an oxidative day-to-day with specific movements to the competition, he's preparing himself for that in such a way that has relevance. So relative to what he has access here to in the facility, he'll do some cyclic movement with the rower. We'll do something with bands and other things that you'll see that are the very beginning. This is the first thing that's happened. It'll go on for a few minutes to get blood flowing in the relevant muscles before we get a bit more aggressive, even though the end game of what is coming today is not intensive.
You mentioned you could even use something like an elliptical trainer.
Yes, we're looking ideally for cyclical movement to begin, which is something that you can repeat, an action that is repeatable over and over to get those cycles of movement going that involve relaxation and contraction. So blood is flowing, you're not accumulating any amount of blood lactate, because once that hits, you're stuck with it for a while. So it's important to keep this low intensity and continuous to feel like you could do it for a number of minutes on end without any real consequences. So Mark's just going to do a variety of movements that are relevant to both what will benefit him in general and that are specific to what's coming later in this session.
There we go. So complicated.
so the speed that he's moving at should be very rhythmic, and because in his mind he's thinking, I'm going to be doing this for a few minutes. So you won't be doing a particular pattern if the resistance is higher for that long. He'll switch to something else because the resistance, even though it's a couple small bands, you can still get a pretty good amount of tension. And so as soon as he feels that it's even getting moderately challenging, he'd want to switch to a different type of movement. And what is wise to incorporate is work all around the body. So what you could even do is, whether you have to back up or not, just sort of do some squats, and then when you stand up, row it. Oh. So you're squatting with the arms extended, and then when you stand up, you row it. So it's just one of many examples of mixing up the movement, because what he's going to be doing today from an oxidative standpoint involves all the movement. He's going to be squatting, benching, deadlifting, but with very submaximal weights, not dissimilar from how a sprinter who incorporates tempo running, which of course is not by any means a necessity, but those who do, a similar set of logic and reason. So he's going through all movements in all positions. So I've asked him to move his elbow around such that the shoulder in this extension in the plane of the scapula is working through its available movement amplitude. So just mixing up the motions in a way that is continuous, in a rhythm that is smooth, that the intensity is low enough that it can be sustained for, whatever this will amount to, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We generally wouldn't need to do more than 10 minutes before we get into the next phase. So you're thinking about moving the joints in such a way that is taking them through their workable range of motion. And because Mark has a lot of limitations mobility-wise in his thoracic spine and scapula, shoulder girdle in general, we're seeking to heat up that area, to not have him move in ways that compromise him orthopedically prior to doing anything more aggressive, penetrative-wise, in terms of tissue deformation, anything that he does with a roller, lacrosse ball or whatever. We're getting heat in the area first.
Come over here.
And so think about moving from upper body to lower body from sort of each period of work to the next.
Gotcha.
So you're 10, 20, 30 seconds in something upper and then the same thing lower.
Right.
All that is available to you.
Kind of get back in
which
here
of
again.
course is varied. Yeah, so your
Right.
squatting movements. And depending upon what your fitness level is specific to these movements, you'll sort of determine the rate at which you can work and how many repetitions you might do in a given movement before you switch to something else. Because we're just looking to gradually raise the heart rate. If we were using a heart rate monitor, we would want to be somewhere between 120 and 130, no higher than 140 beats per minute on average at this point, because Mark's training hasn't involved a lot of this type of activity. I'm pretty confident that if he was hooked up, we'd see higher beats per minute than ideally we would like and what we'll work towards, but not to the extent that it's going to compromise what's coming, because he's the one that's ultimately in charge of how many he does and at what intensity, and understands the objective here. So again, we're getting the heart rate up a little bit, and we're getting the blood flowing in the muscles that are going to be involved with the work forthcoming.
I did a few rounds of this just a couple days ago. It really starts to get you going.
Sure.
Look at these humps in the background just sitting there doing nothing.
What people will find is that even if you're doing something that's lower body, even if the lower body might be the primary part of the body doing the work that day, starting with the upper body to get the blood flowing is of a lower cost.
Right.
Because if we think about what it takes to move the arms around, there's pretty much any condition we could be in where this wouldn't be a problem to start with. Whereas to do body weight squats and other things, there are reasons where you could be stiff in such a way that you wouldn't even, something as simple as body weight squatting, you might not necessarily want to start with that.
It might be stiff, yeah.
Because just the body weight squat might be, you're feeling it from the other day, whereas rarely is that the case with something like this. And
There's some arm circles.
getting the blood flowing anywhere improves the blood flowing everywhere. So even by doing this, I can increase the heat in my quadriceps muscle, even if it's by a small amount. So again, we're going to move all around the body because he's going to be working the squat, bench, deadlift today in an aerobic context.
As Mikhail Kokulev said, Russian warm-up. And then he did a bunch of these and a bunch of these. It was really complicated.
Let's go to the trunk next.
Bring it around town like SpongeBob SquarePants. Oh, my hips kill, especially this left one. Been blown out for years.
note to all medical professionals watching that blown out is in fact clinical terminology. And then we'll
bring it around.
Post up against something. You'll see these in track and field, a hurdler trail leg circle.
Yeah.
Because this is the action of the trail leg as it goes over the circle. So you'll go forwards and backwards.
Kind of out.
Yep, out and over.
This is a side with 0 internal rotation, so that's why it's hard for me to have the foot out more.
Yep.
This is when you warm up like this, it's a good idea to leave your shoelace kind of partially untied, so that way all of a sudden you got to tie your shoe as soon as you start feeling that fatigue settle in. Oh, I'd keep going, but I better tie my shoe first.
So at this point, I don't even know what the time has gone by. Mark's been working. We can hear it when he's talking. His heart's beating. We can see him sweating. So heat is happening. It's been increased all over the body and locally to the areas that are important, which is everywhere, all the major joints, because of what he's about to do. And so now he's in a much better state to perform any contract, relax, stretching, partner assisted, PNF, because heat has already been generated where we want it. And so that's what we'll do now. So
kind of like heating up your butter.
It's
you gotta heat it up a little bit before you want to slice through it.
It's for the same reasons. So
can we do any more warming up, any rower or anything? Or we're good?
No, we're good for what we're going to next. So now we'll go into, since I'm here, I'll assist Mark with some moves that'll focus on primarily contract, relax.
Okay, let me grab one of the mats.
To not exceed any amplitude that he already has, but just to work through it. So what we've moved to now that Mark's heated up well, we're in a safer and more effective place to take him through some amplitudes of movement that a partner and someone qualified can do so in a smart way. And the reason why we don't need to be on a bench or with Mark's arm hanging off the table is because he is tight enough that we can get what we need for now with him just being flat on the floor. And so if we're thinking about improving, people are familiar with the scapular wall slide or something to do on the floor, and regardless of how big and muscular you are, there's no good reason in my judgment to lose the ability to articulate through the scapula in such a way with all of his arms on the floor sliding up and down to have that scapular mobility and thoracic mobility, etc. And so the road to getting there involves increasing pliability in the muscles surrounding the joints that we're moving around. And so now that he's heated up, what I can do with where Mark feels that he's the most restricted from moving is feel with my own hands along those tissues where most of the resistance is coming from, and through very moderate pressure begin to allow his arm to move in ways that without putting pressure on the muscles involved with the work, if you're just looking as where his arm sits, sure, I can just press down on it here, but now I have less knowledge of what's occurring and where he's the tightest in the tissues involved.
And for me, it hurts a lot less with his finger digging in there.
And so
and you're basing it off of tension too, right? You're feeling tension from this arm.
Yeah, that's exactly
and
right.
Hand, and if you feel too much of it, you're not going to keep pushing, right?
Yeah, if I feel too much of it, or if Mark was to say, nope, that's not a good idea. The reason why he's more pliable now to begin with is because he just heated himself up pretty good. So there's more local heat before we even started doing this. So right off the bat, he's going to feel a little bit better getting in positions. And this is just an example of direct pressure on part of the pectoral tissue. But the reason for this is because of where he is felt and where he is immobile.
Is this a specific type of stretching? Does it have a name, or is it
So
just stuff?
For me,
soft tissue.
Yeah, for me the names are. I mean, this is a type of soft tissue application where Mark is passive. He's not attempting to do everything. This is more me doing a little bit of fact finding, just to feel what's happening with my own hands. And as we get into different types of movements, if I want to challenge Mark's external rotators, I put him in a position and I have him externally rotate against some resistance, and we do this for a few seconds. He's relaxing it. We do it again. Go ahead. And at any point, relax. He would communicate to me how everything is feeling. So right off the bat, and this is nothing new, you know, Mark already knows this, and anybody who's worked with him soft tissue-wise sees how quickly he becomes bound up, in this case in external rotation. And we're not attempting to solve this issue right on the spot right now, but alternatively, so now I brace his elbow, and now you're going to push this way against resistance. And these are for a few seconds, and he relaxes. Again. So call these whatever you want. Aspects of proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation: relax, contract, relax. But it's movement, it's exercise. He's got local heat going, so it's of less consequence. And a regular assembly of this type of action is going to yield, amongst everything else that he's doing, gradual improvements. So go again. Relax.
And how much I push into it, I don't have to be the Hulk. I'm just pushing into it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just enough to increase tension specific to this position that we're in. Now push back again. Relax. And as you do some of this work, anybody doing this should feel immediate improvements, even though we're not out here with goniometers and everything else measuring the angular degrees of freedom, etc. That I can feel it and Mark can feel it. He's just able to move with more freedom in positions that were initially more restricted. And so now you're doing this every day, every other day, and you see where the incremental gains lead towards more significant ones. All right, internal again. Relax. Let's go external. Relax. And for me, what I'd like to see from Mark in time is his ability to perform a scapular slide in such a way where the arm is predominantly upper and lower in contact with the mat or the wall or whatever, as he mobilizes the scapula through its workable range, which right now, go ahead and do a couple. You can see the distance from being able to do that he is right now, and
I feel like I'm there.
and it's unnecessary. You just because of how much muscle mass he carries and how strong he is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be unable to perform what many sort of those with orthopedic knowledge would recognize as being fundamental mobility of the.
The easy thing to point to is there's people that bench press more than me that move better. There's
Right.
people that have more muscle mass that move better.
So this is just general. This is the side where the injury occurred. So obviously we're more mindful of that. But nothing is being done here in such a way How's it?
Good. Yep.
So right off the bat, it's from my subjective judgment, I don't feel much difference here than the other side, even though here is where he sustained the injury, and so that's good. But just because the subjective measure is there doesn't mean it's objective either.
Well, that's also could be bad in the sense that this side could be ready to go at any time because of the limited range of motion.
Let's go external. Relax. Do it again.
James is a professional, so
Relax.
I'll say this piece. I think you know, anyone who's watching, you can learn this
Relax.
to a degree by doing.
Internal.
And you got a training partner, you got somebody who you can do some of this stuff with.
Again.
As long as you're communicating
Relax.
on what feels good and what doesn't, I think you're still in a safe zone. It's not uncommon for us to do some stuff like this here at the gym. Not to this degree, but there's no reason why you can't have a training partner help you do certain ranges of motion.
And this is a low intensity day of training, what you'll see him eventually get into. And whenever more penetrative efforts are going to be done, especially when he's done today, in terms of soft tissue penetrations, are always going to be on the low intensity day of training, so as to not compound upon the muscular damage that's already done on the high intensity day of training. And this is the first time I've had my hands on Mark, so nothing of what you see is aggressive for that reason and because he hasn't done the main part of training yet. Let's go on all fours.
Okay.
He rolls over. From a thoracic mobility standpoint, there's a lot of things that can be done. So from this quadruped position, let's say just put this hand behind your head. And so what we'll do is Mark will just attempt to rotate down and bring this elbow towards his other arm, and this is, and you just do maybe 10 reps or something like that, coming back up. This is an example of mobilizing the architecture, the muscle system around the thoracic spine. And those who are familiar with the brilliant work of Dr. Stuart McGill will be no strangers to the thoracic mobility movements, and we'll do one or two of them here that he suggests.
And this feels really good, actually.
For very good reasons. Yep, other arm. Those who, in my view, intelligently accept that what you do to prepare for what's coming is as fundamentally important as what's coming, will then spend as much time as is necessary to do things like this before you even get into the bulk of what's coming, because it's all part of the same objective.
They're kind of here like this.
Yep, so hands behind the head.
Hands are here.
Elbows
Bring
on
them
the
in
bench.
close, and my elbows here.
Yep.
Go on the bench.
Yep. So the reason why hands behind the head and elbows close is it's expanding upon the muscular architecture around the thoracic spine, and then through many articulations of essentially moving the thoracic spine through small ranges of motion, yep, and then back up. These would be the equivalent of very small pounds or kilos of pressure, very small. There's nothing particularly strenuous about this. But the idea is we're looking for movement about this thoracic spine here, and the positioning of the upper arms and the elbows, if he moves them forward, he'll force greater extension here. If he moves them backwards, it'll contribute to deflection. And these are just some repetitions to work focusing on this area of the thoracic spine, and not to some significant degree. It's just to what's currently available. And so Mark, when he's going into flexion, he can emphasize, similar to the cat-camel, really tucking the chin. And when he goes into thoracic extension, he can think of raising his chin. But this is just an example of movement in the area that we're seeking to increase movement.
Yeah, this is like really hard for me because that area doesn't want to move very much.
Right, and so because Mark is tighter through here, we'll naturally see grading compensating movement in the lumbar area. This is unloaded, so it's of no real consequence. But ultimately, this is just one of many contributing factors that will lead to improvements where we'd like to see improvements.
Yeah.
Let's go.
That's a real bitch.
We'll put these back together. We'll go through to the legs, and then we'll get into.
On the back again?
Yeah, let's go on your back. So again, these are done because Mark's already heated up. Whether you can see it on the camera or not, he's sweating. So we're in a much better position to do different types of PNF and contract relax movements. So just you saw the brief overview of just going through some scapular and thoracic mobility. Nothing really, again, this is my first time with him, just to get a feel, and in the interest of time to show some things. So now we go to the legs, and so which is it, this one or this one?
This hip is usually like just tight.
So
both sides probably be tight.
Communication is key here, and what we'll do is we'll start with the types of load being placed on these levers that is of the smallest consequence relative to what we'll finish with. And so here, if I'm just looking at first to see what effectively we're working with, and it's Mark's job to communicate to me if something
feels good, feels okay.
If something's a no-go, then what we work towards is some contract relax. So what I'll do is, and especially because Mark's a big guy, I'm going to pin his leg down with my own, so I'm kneeling in one side and my foot is on the other, because I don't want this hip to come off the ground.
Yeah, it'll come up.
Yeah, if this hip, in this case his left hip, if this comes off the ground, it's relieving the tension from where we want it, in this case predominantly in the glute. So what I'm going to do is, with his leg pinned down, I'm going to drive his knee back, not necessarily in line with his torso, but where
inside.
Yeah, but where I feel the least amount of restriction, because we have to account for movement inside of the acetabulum. And so just naturally, if I'm just looking at his kneecap relative to his hip, if I happen to notice that he moves more freely in a particular angle than another, I'm going to go to where he has the most freedom, because ultimately that will sync up with where he squats and deadlifts, or if not, should, because that's where the femur moves most freely. So at any rate, I push back. When Mark feels that it's a sufficient enough stress, he pushes against me, and we hold that for a few seconds. So push. Then he relaxes, I relax, and what you'll see is, if you're measuring, you'll see me be able to push a little bit farther each time. Yep, push. Relax. And this is what we should see. And this is the value of this partner-assisted work. You'll see me going farther each time. Push. And equally as important, and I usually will do 5 or 6 reps. Push. Relax. Going back forth from one leg to the next.
You can feel like where he takes the leg to first, it automatically gives him a little bit of resistance. When I resist into him, I can feel my leg release. And then as he presses into it, as he takes me to the first position, my leg is more easily going into a new position. Just getting a deeper stretch, as he was mentioning.
So again, you just got to let me know. You start pushing when it feels right to push.
Okay. Yeah, right there.
Okay. Yep. Relax. Again. And again, you know, watching this, it should just be clear that we're going into deeper amplitudes every rep. And it's what should happen with anybody. There's nothing magical about this. It does what it's supposed to do. It's just that a lot of people don't do it. All right, flip over on your stomach.
Yep.
So that was predominantly gluteus. Now we go to quadruped, or rather quadricep and hip flexor. And depending upon the size of the athlete, if I was working with, say, a young female, my own weight could be sufficient to pin down the hips, and ultimately what I'd be doing with my hand under the knee, pinning the hips down and begin to come off of the ground. But because Mark is such a muscular of large mass, I can't provide enough pressure to keep his hips down. So I actually will sit on his hips, but directly above his hips, to avoid putting pressure on the lumbar spine. So I'm literally sitting right on the pelvis.
Like a wrestling match.
And what this then allows me to do is it gives me much greater leverage. So I'll have one hand on the ankle, the other on the knee, and I'm just going to lean back. And the same thing, so when Mark feels that it's sufficient and enough stretch, he's going to pull his knee down to the floor against my resistance. So pull down. So he's pulling, and then we relax. And then the same thing again. Each rep, I should be able to get a little bit more range of motion. Yep, pull. And this, if someone who's doing this as I am, it gives you some knowledge about the muscular condition. You know, how hard is it for me to resist against his effort? Yep. Pull. How does this feel?
Good. Yep.
We'll do one more. Pull. All right. So this is partner exercise. Pull. Yep. And as Mark gets more accustomed to this, he'll actually become stronger in these positions, and it'll be more work for whoever is assisting him. Pull. All right, so that's quadricep, hip flexor. Let's go on your back again. So now that we've gotten work going in the quad hip flexor and the glute, these are be passive to straighten this leg. He's not doing any work here. What I'm going to do is both internally and externally in terms of the rotation of the hip. In this case, we'll go internally. I'll sort of come up and then work towards his opposite shoulder, down and over. And now because there's so much mass in Mark's thigh and torso, the freedom of movement is less. However, even because there's so much mass, it'll still improve. And I can feel, even just pushing on him, there's greater pliability there, which is what happens as local heat increases. How's it?
Feels good.
It should feel good.
Feels really good.
Provided you're not dealing with an existing injury of any consequence, it should feel good.
Yeah, and this hip, has a little bit of like an impingement, but it still feels good. I can feel it kind of pop and go through.
Straighten this
good
one.
range of motion.
Now we'll go externally.
And that's a little harder for me to deal with.
Yep, and that's because of the impingement that you have.
Yeah, because then it wants to hold here. It's like grabbing right in there,
Do you feel?
You're good though.
Do you feel as it comes out? Is it pinching at all on the outside?
No, not too bad.
It's pulling on where the tension is.
Yeah.
So because Mark's dealing with an existing irritation somewhere high up, hamstring, gluteal insertion, coming out here doesn't feel so hot, so we're not going out there. But what will happen is the days progress, literally from one day to the next, by maintaining a regiment of this type of activity, it's going to become more achievable, more achievable, more achievable, until then what we'd ultimately like to do here we're able to do.
Still feels safe, the range you were in, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because I can feel it. With no resistance, this is where his leg goes. And so I know I might be able to put a little bit on there, right. but based upon how he feels, it's clear, because I can feel, even if he wasn't to say anything to me, I can feel where the resistance is. This
feels pretty good on my back too.
Sure. As the flexibility throughout the hip external rotators and hamstrings and flexors of the hip increases, there's less tension placed on the lumbar region of the spine.
Translation: you're getting better positions to lift more weight.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. So here, I can apply more pressure going out because there's no particular injury that he's dealing with that would prevent it. And I'm applying enough effort to move into the slight resistance that I feel from him in order that this serves a purpose. And I can apply this pressure because there's already a lot of local heat. The last maneuver that I would normally do here is for hamstring. Typically save those for last. And that, depending upon the athlete and how limber they are, we might not even do it on this side because of what he's dealing with. So I pin his leg down, and because We want this in the belly of the muscle. So if the athlete is feeling it too much behind the knee, then what we do is we would allow a bit of knee flexion such that he feels it in the belly of the hamstring. That's what we want. So it'll be the same thing here. I'll go, you push when it's enough. Yep, so I can feel him, he's pushing. 5, 6 seconds, relax. All my weight is on him, and then I push enough to get where we need to be based upon the feedback. And again, I'm pinning down his opposing leg so that there's no compensating of his hips coming off the ground. Like I said, I don't even know that we want to do that on this side.
Yeah, you can do it. I think it'd be okay.
All right. And again, in general, in practice, I'll usually do 5 to 6, or suggest 5 to 6 repetitions per movement. And typically at the end of the warm-up or the pre-training, whatever you want to call this, pretty close to the end before you get into the main part of what's happening. How's it?
Good.
All right. Get up. All right. So because those are not a staple of Mark's, what he should feel right off the bat, if you just do a bodyweight squat,
Yeah.
he should feel pretty good.
Yeah, I do.
Relative to normal, in which he would not do something like this.
Relative to that first squat you asked me to do, yeah, for sure.
Right. So why don't we now get into the actual
bench dead.
strength aerobic. So what I've created for Mark, utilizing Yuri Voroshansky's strength aerobic method, in this case of using very low percentages, is a series of work-rest schemes, but these are actually his high-intensity days. This day is purely aerobic. There's not a strength component like there is that you've seen on some of his videos that are already posted, where you see him doing with weight. This is purely aerobic, so this is, for those with track and field knowledge, sort of the equivalent of tempo, but directed towards an athlete apart from track and field. And so in this case, the tempo is executed with the competitive exercises in the order as they appear in the competition. So squat, bench, deadlift, this is a very low intensive way of developing oxidative capacity in the muscles specific to the work. And to get Mark, this is sort of the first step on the road to becoming fit for competition, because he's normalizing to the sequence of squat, bench, deadlift, as opposed to what he's accustomed to in training is a squat and or deadlift day and a bench day, and then going into a meet not having combined the three that we'll see in other types of preparation. And we want to get Mark going in the sense that he's absolutely prepared for squat, bench, and deadlift, because it's been part of his training for the preceding months, even though we're starting with really light weights.
Also, at this part of the training, typically what I've been doing, minus the P&F stretching, I've been doing a little bit of my own, just stretching and mobility and some of the stuff he told me to do. But then also, this is where I would get into using different tools like these guys here, for the thoracic area, this, having somebody dig in, having Filipino Thunder dig in on me with this thing, any of the penetrative stuff he mentioned earlier. Again, make sure you get your body warm before you start doing that, because it just put pressure on that area right off the bat when you're already sore from previous workout. Just doesn't make it nearly as much sense as getting the body warm, getting the body ready for it, getting the body prepared for it. Then you're able to actually get through the muscles a lot easier.
So we'll start with the squat.
Okay.
And now because Mark is so strong, the amount of load that he would utilize to still serve this purpose, he needs a certain amount of weight just to get him in a better squat position. And so whatever that amounts to be for him, because he's going to be going for 40-second intervals with 20-second rest, but very smoothly and routinely, there's an aerobic context here, not a lactic one.
And I've still been using the safety squat bar for now. I can get my arms under a bar. If you want me to use a bar, I can. But the advantage of the safety squat bar for me too is, luckily I don't really have to load it with any weight, and I can hit pretty good depth.